Hi everyone, welcome back, thanks for joining us today. We've got another brand new story to share with you today, so let's begin. My name is Elena Moore, I'm 32, live in Seattle, and work as Director of Operations for a logistics startup that no one in my family has ever bothered to understand. Last month, I found out about the party in the worst way possible, by accident. I was driving back from Mount Rainier after a solo weekend hike, still in my fleece jacket and boots, when I turned onto my parents' street in Maple Glen. The cul-de-sac was lined with cars, a caterer's van parked at the curb, and pastel balloons dancing in the breeze like it was someone's sweet 16. Except it wasn't. There, strung across the garage door in glossy vinyl, was a banner that read, "Congratulations, Camille. 10 years of excellence." Camille, my sister, the golden one, the one who always got picked first, even if she didn't show up on time. I pulled over 2 houses down and just sat in my car, engine off, eyes locked on the banner. People I hadn't seen in years mingled on the lawn. My dad's colleagues, mom's book club. Camille, of course, glowing in a pearl-toned dress, posing with a glass of champagne in one hand and a fake, modest smile. I wasn't angry, not exactly, I didn't even feel surprise. I just felt confirmed that I was never meant to be celebrated. Growing up, I played the dependable one, cleaned up after Camille's messes, helped balance the books at my dad's shop, stayed behind to help mom prep for holidays while Camille worked. I told myself it was fine. I wasn't flashy, I was the helper, the one who didn't need credit. But as I sat in that car, watching the celebration roll on without me, something shifted. It wasn't the party itself, it was the ease, the absolute certainty with which I'd been excluded, no guilt, no pretense, not even a warning text. I backed the car up slowly, turned around, and drove home in silence. That evening, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and typed something I hadn't dared to ask myself in years. How do you know if your family has cut you off emotionally but not financially? I didn't know why I wrote it, but it sat there in the search bar for a long time. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my apartment, or rather, it should have. I'd been waiting on a package from a supplier in Tacoma, something for work, but instead of a box, there was a pale yellow slip in my mailbox that read, "Mail delivery paused due to recipient mismatch." I blinked at it, confused. I hadn't changed addresses, I hadn't updated anything. I went inside, logged into my USPS account, and pulled up the recent activity. And then I saw it. A digital change of service form had been submitted under my name 2 weeks ago, rerouting my mail permanently to an address in Bellevue. My sister's address. I stared at the screen. No way, this had to be a mistake. I called the local post office. A woman named Debbie tried her best to be helpful. "It looks like the request was signed electronically," she said. "Authorization came through as Elena K. Moore." "That's me," I said flatly. "Well, was it you?" I could hear her hesitation. This wasn't the first time someone had been impersonated. "It wasn't," I said, "and I don't have a middle initial." "Oh," there was a silence between us. "Heavy, awkward, I'll file a report," she added quickly, "and I suggest you visit in person and reset your delivery. Bring ID, and maybe check with whoever submitted that form." I didn't need to, I already knew. That evening, I got a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me listen. "This is Thomas Elbridge, estate attorney for the Moore family. I was reaching out to follow up on your portion of the trust paperwork. It's been over 3 months since we sent your packet, and, well, we've received no reply. I'd appreciate a brief call." I froze. Trust paperwork? I hadn't received anything. I called him back immediately. He was polite but curt, like a man juggling too many quiet crises. "It's probably best if we meet," he said. "There's something you should see." The next morning, I took the day off and drove to his office in downtown Seattle, a high-rise that smelled like old coffee and colder money. He met me in the lobby and walked me to a conference room with no windows. "I want to clarify something," he began, placing a folder on the table. "The revised trust was filed 6 weeks ago, but your original version, your name still exists in our archival system. And unless it's formally revoked by both parties, it's still binding." I frowned. "I don't understand." He opened the folder and turned it to face me. There, on the first page, was my name, Elena K. Moore, typed cleanly above the words, "Co-beneficiary, Moore Family Holdings." It was dated 14 months ago, and it had both of my parents' signatures. The newer version, stripped of my name, was signed just 6 weeks ago. I looked up at him. "Can they just erase me like that?" Thomas sighed. "They can try." I left the attorney's office with a copy of both versions of the trust stuffed into a manila envelope that felt heavier than it should. I didn't go home. I parked outside Green Lake, rolled the windows down, and just sat. 2 versions, 2 timelines, one with me, one without. I spread the papers across the passenger seat and studied them line by line. Most of the language was legal fluff. Words like beneficiary, equitable share, asset distribution. But toward the bottom of the older trust, something stood out. Section 9B, contingency clause. If either beneficiary is removed from the trust for any reason, a 60-day arbitration window is granted during which said party may present documentation of prior financial contribution or demonstrate ongoing material involvement in family holdings. Upon validation, original allocation may be reinstated. I blinked. May be reinstated. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. And more importantly, it was still valid because the newer version didn't revoke it. There was no clause that nullified the contingency. It had been overridden, not dismantled. I drove straight to the credit union where I'd paid off $28,000 of my parents' second mortgage 5 years ago. The bank teller remembered me. I had the receipts emailed before I even pulled out of the parking lot. I found the invoice for the roof I'd helped replace, the furnace I'd paid for, the emergency plumbing that Christmas no one thanked me for. I printed it all, 3-hole punched every page, slid it into a black binder I labeled Family Records. It was clinical, clean, cold, but inside, I was shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I reread every page of the trust with a yellow highlighter, tracing my own name like I was reminding myself I still existed. I opened an old Dropbox folder where I'd stored scanned receipts over the years, things I'd forgotten, like the title to the used car I bought for Camille after her accident. It had been in my name for 3 years. I called Thomas the next morning. "There's a clause in the original trust," I told him, "Section 9B, it wasn't revoked." He sounded surprised. "You noticed that?" Of course I did. He cleared his throat. "That clause is rare. Most people don't think to include fallback arbitration." "My grandfather did," I said. There was a pause. "Huh," Thomas murmured, "so that's where the intelligence comes from." A memory surfaced. Me at 13, sitting cross-legged on the porch next to Grandpa Henry as he reviewed a lease contract for a tenant who'd been short on rent. I asked him why he didn't just evict them. He smiled and said, "Always write an exit that lets people come back with dignity. That's what keeps families from breaking." He was a man who trusted paper over promises, and I suddenly realized he must have built this clause in for me. I closed my laptop slowly and stared out the window at the gray Seattle morning. They signed everything over to Camille, but the contract still had me in it. They thought they'd written me out, but the ink said otherwise. I didn't announce my visit. My parents held their usual Sunday lunch the following weekend, and I arrived with a grocery store pie and a bottle of Cabernet that I knew they wouldn't drink. It was the kind of contribution that said I followed the rules. No love baked in, no warmth implied. The house smelled the same. Rosemary chicken, lavender air freshener, and the faint burn of something slightly overcooked. Familiar, but not home. My mother was arranging plates on the counter, giving instructions to a girl I didn't recognize. likely one of Camille's interns. When she saw me, her expression brightened with performative surprise. "Elena, we didn't know you were coming." "Of course you didn't," I said. "I brought dessert." She took it and set it on the counter without looking at it. Camille floated in from the hallway in a soft pink dress that matched her nail polish. "Hey," she said with that silky voice she used when cameras were near, "you made it." I had the day free. "Good," she replied, too quickly. "We saved you a spot at the big table." I blinked. The big table. Growing up, that was sacred ground, reserved for guests, extended family, and people who mattered. I usually sat on the armchair in the corner with my plate on my lap. But today, they pulled out a chair for me, like I was some kind of VIP. I sat down in silence. The conversation buzzed around me. Fundraising galas, garden renovations, Camille's recent appearance on a local podcast about female entrepreneurs. I said nothing, just nodded, smiled when expected, forked my salad without tasting it. And then Camille stood. She tapped her glass and gave a small speech about resilience and legacy. "I'm honored," she said, eyes glistening with calculated sincerity, "to continue the work my parents started. The Moore Foundation means everything to me." Polite applause. Mom dabbed her eyes. Dad stared at his napkin like he'd memorized its folds. No one looked at me. After lunch, I gathered plates without being asked. Reflex, muscle memory. My father appeared beside me at the sink. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know, Camille's got help for all this now, she's taken charge." Of course she had. I placed the final dish in the rack, dried my hands, and turned toward him. "Funny," I said quietly, "how easy it is to take charge of something when someone else already built the foundation." I didn't wait for his reply. I walked upstairs to the guest bathroom, the one I painted 6 years ago after Mom's surgery. It still smelled like lavender and pine saw, and it still didn't feel like mine. The guest bathroom hadn't changed. Same pale blue hand towels, same ceramic soap dish shaped like a seashell. And on the back of the door, still hanging, was the decorative wooden plaque I'd bought from a local artist that read, "Home is built, not inherited." I remember giving it to Mom after her surgery. She'd hugged me, eyes misty, and said, "You always know the right thing to say." Now I wondered if she even remembered I was the one who gave it to her. I opened the medicine cabinet, for no reason at all, habit maybe. Behind some expired ibuprofen and a crumpled receipt from Trader Joe's, I saw something wedged in the corner, a photo frame. I pulled it out slowly. Inside was a picture I remembered vividly, our family trip to Whidbey Island 10 years ago. Camille had insisted on matching denim jackets. I'd set up the tripod, clicked the timer, and run into place at the last second. But this photo, it only showed 3 people, Mom, Dad, Camille. I stared at it, throat tightening. The background was the same, the lighthouse, the cloudy sky, Camille's red scarf, but I was gone. I flipped the frame over, hands trembling slightly. The back wasn't sealed. I pried it open. Tucked behind the photo was the original, creased but intact. There I was, grinning between my parents, arms slung around Dad's shoulder, my own red scarf half covering my chin. They had cropped me out, not just from the trust, not just from the party, from the memory itself. I sat down on the closed toilet lid, the real photo in my lap. My stomach turned, not with rage, no, it was something quieter, colder, a kind of recognition. They hadn't forgotten me, they had rewritten me, they had reshaped the past to justify the present. I folded the original photo, slid it into my purse, and put the edited version back into the frame. Let them look at their neat little lie. I wasn't going to correct it, I was going to expose it. As I stood, my phone buzzed. A message from Camille. "Let's not make this messy, you were never meant to have it anyway." I stared at the screen for a long time, not blinking. She had no idea how cleanly I could dismantle a lie, and I had no intention of screaming. Silence, I had learned, was so much sharper. The next morning, I skipped coffee. I didn't need it. My nerves had already gone electric. I drove straight to the county records office in downtown King County, signed in at the visitor kiosk, and asked for all recent property transfer filings under the Moore name. The clerk handed me a digital tablet and motioned toward a corner workstation. The file came up faster than I expected. There it was. The lake cabin near Cle Elum, our family's quiet place for holidays, retreats, and reconciliation attempts. It had been transferred 3 months ago from my father to Camille, full title, no co-signers. I scrolled down. The deed had been notarized the same weekend Dad was hospitalized with a minor stroke. I remembered the date because I was the one who drove him to urgent care. We'd sat side by side in silence while he clutched a bottle of water and muttered about the hospital being too cold. He hadn't signed anything that weekend, I was sure of it. I zoomed in on the signature, Ronald D. Moore. The loops were close, the angle almost right, but not quite. It looked practiced. I'd seen that signature for decades, on school permission slips, checks, even birthday cards. This one looked like someone trying to imitate from memory. I printed a copy and slipped it into my folder. Next, I pulled up the notary information, a remote notary service, registered to a woman named Lauren Bell. I blinked at the name, Camille's former roommate from undergrad. I leaned back in the hard plastic chair and let the silence press in. I didn't feel angry, not yet. What I felt was that same cold clarity I'd learned to live with. This wasn't an oversight, it was a setup. By noon, I was at the office of Mr. Rowan, the estate attorney who'd handled my grandfather's affairs. He'd long since retired but still kept an office behind a dental clinic in Kirkland. He remembered me the moment I walked in. "You used to bring your own clipboard to meetings," he chuckled, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather said you were the only one in the family who actually read the fine print." I didn't waste time. I laid the deed and trust copies on his desk, showed him the signature, the dates, the notary. He frowned. "That's off," he muttered, "and if your father didn't authorize it, this could trigger something important." "What?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick brown file. "A contingency trust," he said, "created by your grandfather in your name 10 years ago." "A contingency trust?" I echoed, staring at the folder in Mr. Rowan's hands. He nodded. "Your grandfather set it up to activate only under 2 conditions: if your father was incapacitated, or if there was credible evidence of fraudulent asset transfer." He tapped the forged deed. This might qualify for both. The file was thick, but the clause I needed was on page 3, typed in my grandfather's meticulous language, full of formal grace and strategic foresight. In the event of misconduct regarding family holdings, the designated heir retains full right to petition for sole control, contingent upon documentation and witness validation. I swallowed hard. My grandfather had left me a weapon, not for revenge, for clarity. Mr. Rowan slid the folder toward me. "Do you want to pursue this?" "I already started," I said. That evening, I laid everything out on my dining table like evidence in a silent trial. 2 trust documents, mortgage receipts, copies of text messages, deed transfers, the notary registry printout, the photo they had cropped me out of. And then I added one last thing, a folded note, soft at the corners, yellowed slightly with age. I'd found it tucked into the back of one of my grandfather's gardening books after he passed. I had never fully understood it until now. "Elena, people forget names, but they remember steadiness. Your voice doesn't need to be loud to carry weight. If one day this house no longer makes room for you, don't knock, walk in with proof of who you are." I reread it twice, maybe 3 times, then I slid it into the front pocket of my binder. By morning, I had booked an appointment with a private estate lawyer, someone my friend from law school recommended for cases where things are quietly dirty. I met her in a minimalist office with no branding and a view of the water. Her name was Jada Quinn, and she read through my materials without a single pause or raised brow. When she finished, she simply said, "They messed with the wrong daughter." I nodded. I don't want to scream, I told her. I just want the record corrected. Good, she replied, because nothing cuts cleaner than documented truth. We spent the next 2 hours preparing the motion. Not a lawsuit, not yet. Just a petition to freeze all Moore family assets until the trust documents could be reviewed in probate court. Before I left, Jada handed me a pen. When you sign this, she said, you don't just claim your share, you reclaim your story. I signed, and in that moment, I didn't feel victorious, I felt seen. The house looked exactly the same black shutters, same copper wind chime by the porch that Mom insisted sounded like balance. But when I stepped out of the car, heels clicking on the driveway, I didn't feel like a daughter coming home. I felt like a witness arriving to confirm what she already knew. Camille opened the door before I rang the bell. She wore ivory again, that color she loved, as if claiming purity could override every lie. You look serious, she said. I held up the black binder. I am. Inside, the living room was staged like a negotiation scene. My father in his recliner, arms folded, my mother on the edge of the couch with a tray of untouched scones, Camille standing tall, hands clasped like she was chairing a foundation board meeting. I placed the binder on the coffee table without sitting. This, I said, is the original trust, signed and sealed. This is the contingency clause your current version failed to override. This, I pulled out a copy of the forged deed, is illegal. And this, I dropped the notary registry, connects your witness to your roommate. No one moved. Dad cleared his throat. Elena, sweetheart. No, I said, not this time. Camille stepped forward, smile tight. You really came in here thinking you could flip everything over some old clause and a photocopy? I reached into the binder one last time. The letter from Grandpa Henry. I didn't read it aloud. I simply placed it down. Your lies are printed, I said softly. Mine's handwritten. Guess which lasts longer. A silence settled, thick and final. Then my phone buzzed, on speaker. Attorney Jada Quinn's voice poured into the room. This is official notice that the Moore estate is under legal freeze pending review. All property actions are suspended. Parties may not transfer, sell, or claim ownership until proceedings are complete. Camille's mouth parted. Mom looked like she'd swallowed glass. Dad stared at the rug, smaller than I'd ever seen him. No yelling, no chaos, just the sound of everything recalibrating. I turned toward the door. Elena, Mom said behind me, voice barely above a whisper, we didn't think you'd want any of it. I paused, just long enough. Funny, I said, hand on the knob, that you gave it all away before asking. And then, one last line, measured, simple, surgical, you said I gave up on this family, but you signed first. I walked out without slamming the door. Later that evening, I stood on the porch of the lake cabin, my name now on the title. The air was cold, quiet, laced with pine and truth. I didn't need revenge, I just needed the records to reflect what they tried to erase. And now they did.